Zach Reiser here, and welcome back to another bass effects review video. Today I'll be getting into the Polaris from Spaceman Effects. At its core, the Polaris is an overdrive pedal, but as per usual for Spaceman, they have found a way to cram in something a little different inside of this beast. And in the case of the Polaris, it is its filter section, which allows you to get some pretty out there synthy funky sounds. Without further ado, let's jump into it. Here's my bass's dry tone Dingwall ABZ 6-string on the neck pickup. Real quick, let's do a rundown of the controls. We have the output gain, where the level knob is. The drive controls the amount of distortion. The filter controls the cutoff frequency of the filter, and it is connected to this depth toggle right here. When the depth is to the left, you have a classic one-pole low-pass filter, which is what you think of when you think of a tone pot. So you get that nice, subtle, high-end roll-off. When it's in the middle, you have a two-pole low-pass filter, and now you're getting a more sharp cutoff of those high-end frequencies. But where it really gets interesting is when you have it to the right, and now you have a resonant two-pole low-pass filter. So this is going to be your synthy sweeps and your funky wah effects. The bass toggle here for bass players, in my opinion, most of the time is always going to be to the right, but to the left is a slight bass cut, in the middle is the flat position, and to the right is a subtle bass boost. But because you're adding high-end frequencies from the drive, I feel you need that little bit of bass boost to really make your bottom end feel full. And then finally, we have the initial. Now this is essentially rolling in pre-filter distortion. So when you have a really extreme filtered setting, you still get a little bit of your core distortion sound there, so you're not totally losing your high end. And I'll show that off later in the video. Really fast, I want to show that bass switch off because I'm going to leave it in the right position for the whole video. So here's my dry low B. And now here is the bass switch in the middle. Bass switch to the left, so a little bit of bass cut. Honestly, bass players will never use that. And then my personal favorite setting, bass to the right, which is that little subtle fattening on the bottom end. All right, let's run through the range of the drive knob. So I'm not even going to touch the filter for a minute. I have initial rolled all the way in, so I get that pre-filter distortion happening here, and I have the filter totally open and in the one-pole non-resonant mode. Here is the lowest amount of drive you get with my bass. Drive at about 10 o'clock. Drive a little bit past noon. I've rolled the initial all the way down, so I'm only getting the filtered distortion. And I have it on that one pole setting. So yet again, this is kind of a classic tone pot sound. Now, if I roll this filter all the way down, I'm controlling it currently with an expression pedal on the floor, and you can hear kind of the range of that subtle high-end roll-off. Actually, it's not very subtle. It gets pretty rolled off in the low positions. But let's hear what that sounds like just for a second. you can see, this one pole filter setting is kind of your classic tone shaping. So I've rolled off just a little bit of that high end to kind of sweeten it up, and I find this particular setting to be incredibly pleasing for some soloing. And to add just a little bit of ambience to my solo sound, I've turned on my Strymon Volante. Opening that filter all the way again with my foot, and now cranking the drive all the way up to about 3 o'clock. Let's get a little fatter. So I have turned on my Boss OC2 Octavert by itself. It sounds like this. Let's run that into these Polaris settings. So I'm going to leave my OC2 on here for a second just to keep that fatness there, but now I've put the depth in the middle position, which yet again is a 2-pole not resonant filter. So it's a very dry filtered tone, but a very drastic filter sound still. Moving on, I have maxed the drive. I've pulled that initial back in and turned the filter to be fully open again with my foot just to hear the raw grit of this pedal. So hopefully by now you have a good idea of the range of the drive of this pedal and maybe some of the more subtle filtering that it can do. But in my opinion, what it's really designed for is the more extreme filtering. So let's get into that. So I got the drive cranked and I have the depth to the right, and I'm controlling that filter cutoff again with my foot, and let's hear what some of those synthy sweeps sound like. Let's get a little bit synthier. So I've turned my Boss OC2 on, but now it's only the sub-octave signal, so that nice fat round octave tone. And let's run that into these same Polaris settings. Pulling the drive knob back to about noon, I want to show off an example of when I might personally want to use the initial knob to soften this filter effect. So with the initial totally off, I'm getting this very pronounced wah-like effect. So same exact settings, except I have rolled the initial to noon now. And what this has done yet again is rolling in some pre-filter distortion. So you can almost think of it like a clean blend, but a distorted clean blend, if that makes any sense. Rolling the initial back down and turning the drive back up to about 3 o'clock. I want to turn my Strymon Volante back on and get into some kind of synthy lead tones with the Polaris. Another quick example of having the initial rolled in a little bit to kind of make it a little more natural sounding. I have my Boss OC2 turned back on in that normal standard octave mode, running into these Polaris settings. One more fat, juicy bass synth sound for you here. I have that Boss OC2 running into the Polaris on these settings. It sounds like this. And just to make it ever so fatter, let's do some double modulation and add a nice Phase 90 after the Polaris. So that is my demo of the Polaris from Spaceman Effects, a refreshingly unique take on an overdrive pedal. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe below. It really does help me out, and as usual, I'll be back with more pedals and effects review videos, as well as some performance videos. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.